Welcome to this introduction to primary data collection. Primary data collection refers to the process in which researchers gather and collect data that is required for a research project. The data can be gathered from various sources, and primary data is original data that is collected specifically for a research study, as opposed to secondary data that already exists. There are general advantages and disadvantages to primary data collection. One of the advantages is that the relevance of the data to answer the research question. And also because the researchers identified and collected the data specifically for that question, they're familiar with the data and it is very timely to the research study. It's collected in the context of that project, and it addresses the specific objectives of the study. However, it also comes with some disadvantages, and that includes the fact that it's quite timely and expensive to do primary data collection. There are also some challenges specific to primary data collection that include the identification of the population. And then once you've identified the population that you want to collect the data from, you need to recruit participants, and these may not be so readily available. For example, if you want to collect data from hospital CEOs that have very little time for answering surveys, interviews, etc. And there might be some ethical challenges as well when you want to collect sensitive data or data from vulnerable population groups, such as people living with HIV or homeless population, for example. So there are different ways of classifying the data that you're collecting. It can be qualitative or quantitative. It also can be classified in terms of the time perspective to the collection. So it can be collected at one point in time, and that's cross-sectional data. It's generally inexpensive, so that's an advantage of cross-sectional data, and it's particularly important when you have a very large sample size. However, one of the weaknesses of this method is that you cannot make any causal association, and it really only tells you about information at one point in time. So association between variables, but not so much in terms of differences happening over time. But if you do want to look at how a variable might vary over time, then you're doing longitudinal data collection. And you can do it as a panel or time series, depending on whether you're looking at the same population that you're collecting the data from. So in longitudinal data, you will be collecting data at different points in time, either from the same population or from a population that represents your population of interest. And the advantage of longitudinal data is that you can then identify different trends and cycles in the variable that you're interested in. You can also make causal association between variables when you're looking at over time. So there are different methods to collect primary data, and that includes surveys, focus groups, individual in-depth interviews, experiments, observation, and simulation. I won't explain these in detail, but I invite you to go watch other videos that do explain these methods on our website. Finally, this is a checklist of elements to do when you're conducting primary data collection, and that includes defining the data that needs to be collected, determining the need and the use of the data to be collected, determining if sampling is necessary, and if so, what will be the sampling technique that you'll be using, and identifying your data sources, determining the methods of data collection, obtaining consent from your participants, developing a data collection tool, whether it's a survey, an interview guide, etc., and then testing and validating this tool. You need to also determine how the data will be recorded and document the data collection method. So this was our introduction to primary data collection. Thank you for listening, and I invite you to visit our website at hsprn.ca for a detailed handout on primary data collection and for other videos on health services research methods.